My favorite.
It's Judd's Hockey Show.
That's right. We are back. We are back because the rookies are going to be on the ice next week. Training camp starts towards the end of this month. I think it's around the 21st. Everyone's going to be on the ice at Tria Rink for the Wild. Zolgad and Declan Goff, you've been demanding the return of Judd's Hockey Show. And after...
I've been demanding it. It's more. It wasn't been not a demand on your end.
No, not you. The Twitter world has been demanding.
Oh, the Twitter world. I was going to say
you being our loyal viewers and listeners who we appreciate so much. Not you, Declan.
I've been waiting for Billy Guerin to make a move. That's what I've been waiting for, to give me one last little taste before training camp as we finish up on the links here, Judd Zolgad. There's golf season is still in full effect. Training camps are around the corner. It seems a little more something to talk about here. It's been an up and down off season. I thought it was going to be a little bit more entertaining than it was, but in general, it's obviously been still a pretty decent off season.
Yeah, it has been a little bit quieter than we expected. The Kirill Kaprizov contract still not done yet. I think we are inching closer and closer because the KHL season has started. It started September 1st. He's not going back there, so he has one option basically, which is to sign here and play for the Wild. But let's do this. Let's delve into the Wild depth chart and one position in particular, because I think this is the place where we're surprised that more was not done. And that is at the center spot. Okay, Declan Goff. The center spot was one where we started the offseason with visions of Eichel dancing in our heads. Would they trade for Jack Eichel? And then we dumbed it down to, well, it's probably not going to be Eichel, but what about Christian Dvorak, or what about Thomas Hertl of the San Jose Sharks? Well, Christian Dvorak was traded this week to the Montreal Canadiens by the Coyotes. It was well known he was going to be dealt, and the Coyotes got a pretty damn good return, a first and second round draft pick for a guy who is certainly solid but not a star player. I want to start with this, Dex. I've got a list in front of me of the guys on the Wild's current roster that is on their website at wild.com of guys who they are listing at center. Okay,
Dan Myers, friend of the show, putting this together, I'm guessing, too, right?
Because it's the roster itself, so it might be the personnel folks. But yes, and what's interesting about this is the roster that when they take the ice late this month for the start of training camp, almost certainly is going to be the centers who will be out there. And from this, they're obviously going to have to pick four. But what makes it more intriguing is the names, or should I say the lack of names. All right, I'll start at the top alphabetically, and then we'll get into a couple that are interesting. Nick Bjugstad is still listed as a center. Now, I think he's a wing. I don't think he's a center. Can he take some faceoffs? Yes. Can he play there occasionally? Yes. Do I think that he is a guy that's going to make the roster? Yes. Do I think he is a center? Absolutely not. What do you think?
I don't think he's a center, no. I think he's a fine he can play fourth line center. How about that? He can play fourth line center, and I want him to do nothing more with that. But he's mostly a wing.
And he can take a face-off, but I mean, he's not a guy that I would say privately, where the Wild has their own depth chart on, let's say, a computer or a chalkboard, Dex. I think Bjugstad's a wing. I think he's a fourth line wing type of guy. I'm going to blow through the next two because I don't think that they have a chance to make the club short of spectacular training camps. Guy that played in 4 games for the Wild last season, 28-year-old Joseph Cramarosa. And the next one is a third-round pick in 2018. He spent the last 2 years with the Iowa Wild, 22-year-old Connor Dewar. I think both those guys are be at training camp probably. I don't think they'll make it out of training camp.
Their bodies. They're bodies. They're bodies with skates. Yep.
The next one is currently a guy that signed a contract extension in the past couple months, and currently your best center, Joel Eriksson. The next one I have highlighted as a guy I think makes the roster probably. 28-year-old Frederick Gaudreau, who played in 19 games and scored 2 goals for the Penguins last year. Evason is very familiar with him from their time together in Milwaukee when Gaudreau was in the Nashville Predators system. I think he's got a good chance to make the opening night roster, or a chance, but it doesn't really excite me. How about you?
He'll make the roster for sure. Where he dresses and where he falls on opening night is a little up for debate. He makes the roster, I think, 100%, to be honest. He had some chemistry and some time with Fiala when the both of them were in Nashville about 3 years ago. And there was some, discussion of, well, in a limited sample size, they played well together, but they literally shared the ice for 55 minutes. My long-winded way is no, doesn't really excite me. A decent depth guy, but again, that's the ceiling. He's a depth
Can he win
guy.
some faceoffs?
Probably.
That type of thing?
Right.
Okay. Going through the rest of what the Wild has on their website at center. Victor Rask, who right now would make the team.
Yep.
Kyle Rao, who right now, in my opinion, would not make the team. And Nico Sturm, who had 11 goals and 17 points in 50 games last year. I thought he played well. He makes the team for sure. Two interesting things. One is something I question what the intent was, and one is no surprise. First one, Ryan Hartman right now listed as right wing, not center, although I think he's got a chance. Although the way that Bill Guerin talks, he sort of liked him there. So I wouldn't dismiss him as battling. And I don't know that Victor Rask is a slam dunk to be on this team. But I would say this about Hartman. I wouldn't dismiss him as an option. If the Wild doesn't like how training camp is going, they plugged Hartman in at center. He played okay. He's not great there, but he played fine. But he's serviceable there. And then and then here's the wild card, and here's the most important path that I think we could possibly go down when we're talking about why the Wild did not make more of a splash move for a guy like Christian Dvorak. And that is, although he is not on the roster officially yet, Marco Rossi, who I have become convinced they are going to give every chance to make the opening night roster, and who I've become convinced they think can step in immediately, despite the fact that he missed almost the entirety of last season because of COVID complications, and play on a nightly basis and actually ascend the depth chart fairly quickly. I don't know if it's smart or not, but that's what I've become convinced of with the lack of a move.
I think the lack of the moves basically point to the fact that, yes, he'll probably make the roster. My thing is Guerin was hesitant to give Matthew Boldy time in the playoffs. He was hesitant to call him up in general. So with Rossi going through this off the ice issue with his health, are you really just going to throw him to the Wolves into the NHL? I think in general, I'd rather see him be getting minutes than Frederick Gaudreau and Nick Bjugstad and even Ryan Hartman for that matter. Victor Rask, in my opinion, is a slam dunk to make this team unless he's traded. Like Victor Rask is going to be probably your one or two center.
Unless you can trade him. Right.
So Marco Rossi basically fits into that. Guerin has yet to really show that he wants to give prospects basically the entire ice and say, here it is, here's your opportunity. Now, if he impresses, great, but I'm going to have to wait and see on that. I don't know if they're going to do it.
I agree with everything you said. Here's my thought process now. And I don't know it's right for sure, but I have this feeling. I think Boldy and Rossi are different, and this might be right, it might be wrong, it might be fair, it might not be fair, based on the positions they play, Declan. Centers are so hard to find, and if you've got one that you think is good, I think there's more immediate expectation that you can't afford to suppress that player. Now, I would have had Boldy in the playoffs. I would have personally, I saw enough from him to at least want to see in the very competitive atmosphere of the playoffs what he could do at wing. They clearly disagreed with that. But I think when you're starting a season, and again, it's position scarcity. There's a lot of wingers. There's not a lot of guys who are good, especially really good at center. I think Rossi's opportunity might be determined by the position he plays and the Wild's need there. Again, I'm not defending it and saying that's right. It's just the feeling I'm getting.
Yeah, I get it. And from a cost and cap friendly standpoint, they almost have to play these centers right away. I mean, they obviously can wait to go down the road, but they're basically going to be making chump change for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And then even on their next bridge deal, probably will not break the bank unless they are, Kirill Kaprizov level good, which I don't believe, even with Rossi and Boldy having pedigrees, are going to be ascending to that level. Nope. That's the 100th percentile level. But I get why Marco Rossi has every opportunity to make the roster. I'm curious if he does. I would honestly say it's 50-50, and I wouldn't be surprised if he makes it and he's possibly a healthy scratch every once in a while. I don't know what they want to do with him. I don't know if they want to send him to Iowa to get him all those minutes and and have him be playing top line minutes in Iowa, or if they'd rather have him here and have him being plugged and played in situations that work best for him. I understand why sending him to Iowa is maybe the smarter move to have him consistent top line minutes, but I can also see a case why Bill Guerin says, no, I kind of want him here in the event we need to play him right away.
I think in training camp, he's going to get every chance possible to prove that he belongs here. I give him a 75% chance. Now, if he comes to training camp and looks weak and has a bad camp, he'll be gone. But if he comes to training camp and looks like he fits in, he makes it. And I don't think that there's as much concern. So, because that's what's weird about this conversation, Dex, when you get back to the whole Boldy thing, right? It's like, why didn't he play in the playoffs? Why not, get him it's not like your depth wingers were so good that you were like, well, we basically got Gretzky playing here and Gordie Howe.
Played Kyle Rao over him.
Right, exactly. So I understand what we're talking about is confusing, but that's why I've started to become convinced that this might have to do with the position that you play. But I think Marco Rossi is going to get every opportunity on God's green earth to prove himself. And if he looks like he can play, I think he plays opening night. And then we'll go from there. Because if he struggles, I mean, you can't just keep playing him, or you probably don't. And that also pivots to a time where you might have to start talking about making the trade that they didn't make this summer for a potential center. Let's get back to Dvorak, though. Yeah. When you saw the price for Christian Dvorak going to Montreal, first and second round pick going to the Coyotes, is that a trade that you would have made at this particular time?
Yes, I would have made that trade. I wonder what the offer was pre this draft, because the Wild had 2 picks. The Wild had a bunch of picks in the first 3 rounds. They obviously still have a first round pick next year. Not to dissect your question, but if I could have gone back and had this same trade offer the night of the draft or the day leading up to the draft, I think it's a no-brainer to pull the trigger on it. I get that Chuck Fletcher has punted on a bunch of first-round picks. Guerin's been adamant that he wants to build through the draft. That's the right process. We all know how to build an NHL team and how to build any team. It's through your draft. But you're making a big-time gamble that when you're returning now to the regular Central Division and you overachieved a little bit last year, and you're just waiting for the right player or the right compensation. I think for someone like Christian Dvorak, who's making like $4.5 million for the next 4 seasons, and last year really started to come into his own and was posting a career high across the board in statistics, and is still 25, 26 years old, I don't really see how you weren't able to make that trade. I get the Jack Eichel price. I get the Thomas Hertl price. Bill Guerin has said that, look, if I can just wave my magic wand and find a number 1 center, I would. People need to understand that finding a number 1 center is next to impossible. Totally understand where Billy's coming from there, and any NHL executive for that matter. I don't think missing out on this trade shipwrecks the Wild season by any means. It doesn't make me think, oh, that season's in the can. But if we get about a month in, and it gets to Thanksgiving time or gets to the holiday time, when really things start to set in the NHL, if your center position is not satisfied, then I will play revisionist history and say, well, Christian Dvorak probably was the right guy to trade for. If he goes, if he's put on this team, he gets to play with either Kirill Kaprizov or Kevin Fiala. Let's be honest. Arizona actually has some pretty decent depth at center, but Phil Kessel, that is not necessarily the player he used to be. You put him in Minnesota, and he has his number 1 wing right beside him in either Kirill Kaprizov or Kevin Fiala, if not both of them, possibly playing on the same line around the power play. I really think that this was the perfect type of trade to do. And even if after the draft of the fact, if you had to give up next year's first and a conditional second in the 2024 draft, I still think you would have done it. I think it's a missed opportunity for the Wild, and it's a gamble that, to your point, that Rossi and Boldy probably have the higher up to make this roster, and Bill Guerin wasn't able to make that price. You just can't assume that every draft pick you have in the first round is going to turn into a superstar. The majority of them aren't. So I really think, to me, missed opportunity to not trade for Christian Dvorak.
Okay, so what if I present it this way? The Wild gets off to a good start, or they're an extremely competitive team, which they could be. Mm-hmm. And we get into the dead of winter and then towards the trade deadline. And you can make the exact same trade for Hertl, because the Sharks are going to be bad. And you can make a trade for him. Now, he is a pending UFA, so he's gone probably, or almost, because cap wise, if you're the Wild, you can't afford with where you're going to be starting in 21-22 to keep him. Would you make that trade? Because I do believe that Hurdle's a better player than Dvorak. Like if I could have, and if you could have one for a potential playoff run and plug him in, I think Hurdle's the better player. So if that opportunity comes, one, do you make the trade, and two, do you consider that actually to be a better use of your assets in trying to go for it? Because the Wild's in this really odd position, Dex, because they've got some cap room right now. Like they've got flexibility, they can do things, but that door suddenly just shuts in 2021-22.
So I do think the Sharks, what am I from Boston? The Sharks, that is, would come back and say they need a little bit more from that. But to answer your question, if it was just a first and a second, let's just in our fantasy world, right, or a mid-tier prospect that they want back as well. I probably still do that. I think fans need to understand that when you're entering this cap hell that the Wild are in, and if you're not able to re-sign Thomas Hurdle, who you just pointed out is a UFA at the end of this calendar season,
and you couldn't re-sign him. I'm sure you couldn't.
I don't think you can either. He's going to ask for 7 to 8 at least. I probably do the trade if that's the exact compensation, a first and a conditional second in a future draft. Yeah, I probably do it. I probably do it to put you over the top. Thomas Hurdle is a better player than Christian Dvorak. And if the Wild are good right now and you see a window to make it to the Stanley Cup, you do it.
And Bill Guerin has to know like how weird this is. He has a year here to sort of just like push all his chips in, and then he's got to sort of bail out a little bit. And I mean, that's apparent, and that's really, really unusual. So I got to think that there's another plan here. If Rossi has a great camp, and let's say he's good, let's say he's really good, your problem is not completely solved, but it's pretty much solved. If he's not good and your team, or I shouldn't say that, if he's not ready yet and your team is clearly set to be successful, then I think you do have to sort of pivot and say, we're going to have to make a trade I really don't want to make for a guy like Hurdle, who can at least step in for the rest of this season and help carry us.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to know that. It's just so readily apparent.
Yeah, it's just a big assumption to make that Rossi and Boldy are going to step in here and be A1 contributors. They might contribute. I'm not saying that they'd be a disaster, but it takes time for guys to blossom. Kirill Kaprizov came into this league because he had 5 years experience in the KHL and was already a professional hockey player. Marco Rossi really hasn't played organized hockey in almost, over a year now. And it's just, when you see a window, you have to attack it. And you can't assume that windows are just open for 3 to 5 years, and that goes to every Minnesota sports team, and especially the Wild.
They know exactly that they have 1 year where I don't know if it's wide open, and I consider them to be a top Stanley Cup contender. I really don't. But they have 1 year with some financial flexibility, with some good players. I think on Dvorak, here's my guess. I think on Dvorak, what they said was, okay, if we trade a first and second for him, he's a nice player. But is he like discernibly better from Eriksson Ek? Like, is he a million steps up or a lot of steps up? And they came away saying, no, he's not, which leads me to believe that if Rossi isn't the player that they expect him to be or want him to be yet, that there's something else on the back burner as far as in-season trades go. Because Hurdle would, if you could get him and plug and look, the race for him among contenders at the deadline will be pretty intense. So it's not a slam dunk. But if you could get him and plug him in, I think you say depth chart wise, Dex, he's my one. Like there's no debate.
An A1. He's a number one center.
I think the Dvorak conundrum was he's really not your A1. He's an improvement on a lot of guys that you've got. But this goes back to our Twins conversation so many times about ace pitchers. Because it's not like you can just go find one. And that's Guerin's point, I think. So I'm trying to think through. It feels like they have something else in mind here that we're not seeing. And that we just all thought, they're going to get a guy, and Dvorak might come here. Hurdle, my guess is the Sharks are going to hold on to him as long as possible because that's going to drive the value there. There's something else at work here, I think, that we don't see clearly, and that might be it.
Yeah, I mean, It is what's going on. It's a big assumption and gamble that they have the right pieces in place in Boldy and Rossi. It could be something where by the trade deadline that they can find someone. I'm curious how it goes there, but I just you need someone else down the middle. And yeah, you can't just acquire number one ace out of thin air, number one center out of thin air. But Christian Dvorak becomes your number one center on this team if he's acquired today. He would be your number one center. And just assume that Victor Rask, who played admirably for Victor Rask over this last shortened season,
right?
It's another assumption to assume he's going to be that same player or better. It's even a larger assumption to assume that. So I think it's a missed opportunity. I'm still looking forward to the Wild season. I'm more curious on the development of Rossi and Boldy than I am of missing out on Christian Dvorak for sure. But it is a trade that I probably would have made if I was playing armchair GM.
If Rossi develops like that they think that he might, and he steps in immediately, they look very smart. If he doesn't, they have to make a move. And I think it's that simple. And because of the fact that I'd prefer pursuing Hurdle to Dvorak, if that's what you do and you can win those sweepstakes, which again won't be that's going to be really competitive, then you've done a pretty good job. If you haven't, it's a misstep. And the problem that makes this even more confounding is the fact that, again, you have a 1-year opportunity here. So this is not like you can be like, oh, we'll come back and get him next year. The next few years after this are going to be very different financially. And then if Rossi develops slowly and it takes some time, he could be the answer gradually, but I don't think you're going to really be pursuing a Stanley Cup in 2 years. I don't think you're going to have the opportunity to. I think you can be pursuing at least a playoff run this year. I've got one more for you before we wrap up here, Judd's Hockey Show. Where do you stand on the whole very now convoluted Eichel situation?
Well, I know he changed. Yep.
Soon. And by the way, the league got involved. He changed agents and the league's like trying to facilitate to help out here because he's a star player and nothing's happened.
Yes, he changed representation. He wants the hell out of there. I don't blame him. Buffalo clearly isn't going to get what they want for him, which is those 3 or 4 first-round picks and a top prospect in return. For God's sakes, they gave one first-round pick and a prospect for Sam Reinhart. Another trade I would have done if I was the Minnesota Wild to Florida on draft night. I would have done that trade as well. With Jack Eichel, the price is going to come down. It's obvious it's going to come down. The problem is this dude still hasn't had the surgery. And I do blame the Sabres for that. This is not an Eichel problem. This is a Sabres problem. The Buffalo Sabres, who are trying their very, very best to clean up that franchise and return it to what it was 20 years ago, they are screwing this kid over. And this new GM might be a good hockey sense person and might be looking to turn this organization around. But I'm going to continue to say it. This organization is a bunch of buffoons, and they're screwing over one of the best players in the NHL. And if the Wild can swoop in and outget him for a discounted price, great, I'm all for it. But I can't really look at the Sabres right now and have a whole lot of respect for them for what they're doing.
Yeah, they're not well run. They're I don't know if their current executive staff is good, but the Pagulas, as much good as the Pagulas have done in owning the Bills, and look, it's been great. They own the Sabres too, and the Sabres are just a dumpster fire, and it's a complete mess. And yeah, they're literally now going to be holding a marquee star player hostage, and I don't know why, and I don't know where he's going, but the fact that they still can't decide on the fact that Eichel wants to have a procedure done that I don't think an NHL player has ever had done, and the Sabres are like, well, just rest, and now we don't know if he's going to just rest, and we don't know if he's going to play. It's ridiculous. I would say that at the end of the day, their asking price is still going to be too high, that a team like the Wild wouldn't do it. But yeah, it's unfortunate because Jack Eichel is one of the players that we want to watch and see play, and he is just basically in Siberia as far as the National Hockey League goes.
Well, okay, well, one last thing here.
Yeah,
as I come up with this idea. Another would you rather situation, as you just kind of pointed out earlier when we were talking about Christian Dvorak.
Yep.
Let's say the price is the same, because as time moves on, the price for Jack Eichel is going to go down. But eventually you will get him, and he's going to be making $10 million against the cap for the next 4 years, 5 years.
Yes.
Thomas Hertl is a UFA. and you're going to have to roll the dice that he doesn't re-sign with you. But you could re-sign him to, let's say, maybe not 10, but somewhere between 7 and 8. Who would you rather have?
Can I make the Eichel contract work after this season if I'm Bill Guerin? Because if I can make the contract, work long term, I'll take Eichel, although I have major concerns about that neck problem, but I don't know enough about it yet to officially write him off. But I mean, if we're talking about getting a guy to make a run this year, it's probably Hertl because of the unknown with Eichel. So if I could make the $10 million contract work, have Eichel, and not completely cripple myself, which I feel like I would do financially, I'll take Eichel if the price is the same. But I mean, that's the problem is like right now, it sounds like the price is still way too high. I don't know. It's a hockey thing that drives me nuts. Like this is stupid. This is absolutely stupid to have a player like, let's decide, is he going to have the surgery or is he not? And then let's get on with our lives and allow a guy who's a star player to potentially return. Like the clock's just ticking now and nothing's happening. It drives me nuts. It's a star player. It's inexcusable. Like, this is not a third line guy who we don't care about. Okay, his life's impacted. That's too bad, but I don't really care that much. This is one of your, like, ESPN should have this guy as part of their ad campaign.
Right.
And instead, but yes, if I could make it work, I'll take Eichel. And if it's going to be short term, Hertl, because I don't know if Eichel can even play this year. How about you?
I think just given the unknown with Eichel, I think I roll Thomas Hertl, and I know he's older. He's 3 years older than him.
He probably walks away.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can afford to keep him.
I think I roll with Hertl. I think I just roll with Thomas Hertl at that point. I would do that. I'd absolutely do that.
But I mean, I will say this. Hertl's the type of guy. Did Chuck Fletcher ever get a guy like that?
No,
he got what's his face, Martin Hansel.
Martin Hansel, and the other ones were bargain bins.
But by the way, I like Christian Dvorak more, but I wonder if the Wild's brass looked at a trade like that Hansel trade, because that was they gave up a lot to get him. He did nothing. Too much. But I wonder if they looked at that trade and they're like, you know what? Again, it's not really a number one. It's not really a number one type of guy.
But to make a long episode longer, like you have to take risks. You have to. You have to take them at the right
time. And you got to be right.
When is the right time? When is the right time? You're gonna miss sometimes. You're gonna make mistakes. Right. Don't be afraid to then make additions.
But don't give up the collateral that you might have to get Hertl, to get Dvorak. And if Rossi develops, I get what the Wild's doing here. It's just that they're doing it in such a small window and time period that if they are wrong, that's the problem is, this is not hey, in 2 years, it's going to be great. In 2 years, you're going to be so financially strapped, you can't even buy a newspaper. So I'm not disagreeing completely. I'm just saying this is a very, very high stakes game of poker.
It is.
And you're going to be off that table no matter what very quickly. And if you screw it up, you're going to be, the other thing. Oh, okay. I'm going to give you one last thought. I'm going to give you one final thought because I think it also might factor in. And I'm willing to bet that you will disagree completely with it. But I think what they're factoring in is this one. After this year, let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. This team could be not good. Like, you're so up against the cap that this team, you are going to have very few options other than your young talent. So what if they're thinking, why do we want to give up first-round draft picks if those draft picks might be very high first-round draft picks, which is why your point about the draft this year made way more sense when you would have known what you were giving up. But I'm saying, what if they're thinking now, well, if we give up, if we're trading away future first-round draft picks in the next couple of years and we're bad, those are potentially lottery, top 5, top 10 picks.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out what all the scenarios might be because I don't know how many times we've had conversations that revolve around sort of knowing that you're going to very possibly get bad.
Right. This is a big gamble, man. This is a ridiculous gamble. So, and I'm excited for the Wild, by the way. I know it sounds like I'm doom and gloom. I'm not doom and gloom.
Hockey season. I'm jacked.
All in. All right. And by the way, I think I did the math. So pour your coffee too. But 7 of the first It's like 15 games are all 9:30 start, 9 o'clock or later starts. So
Declan loves that.
I'm
That's such
okay with
BS.
that. I
I'm
like
not.
that. I
don't
like that schedule.
No. And then they don't play in February because of the Olympics.
Well,
I didn't
that's
even
dumb.
go off on my
We agree with
Olympic
on that one.
rant.
We
I
agree
didn't
on
go
that
off
one.
on my Olympic. Oh,
Thank
it's
you.
great for the sport. You
Don't
know
care.
what? Have another tournament in the summer, or don't have one at all. I'm here for the National Hockey League, not European hockey. You know who's going to star in the Olympic Games? Granlund. You know who I don't care about? Granlund, because he's not that great of NHL player. Okay, so let him go back to Europe and play. I don't care. All right, we're done.
All right, man.
Say your thing.
Fast shoot school.